Where there is a current traffic or a flagman protecting an adjacent track with movements against the current of the traffic may be recalled upon the advice of the train dispatcher that no movement against the current of the traffic has been or will be authorized. Inspection must be made on each side of all cars units, and it must be known that the equipment tracker, the safe condition of all wheels, and properly position of the rail before seating the train or adjacent track. Receiving the radio notification must proceed a restricted speed or stop if short of any obstruction of the flagman. Use of advised of the track and clear and it's safe. Proceed. Rule 103: shoved, kicked, or dropped. When the cars are shoved, kicked, or dropped over the road crossing or grade, a crew member must be in position or cruising to warning the traffic until it is occupied, and each movement of the overcrossing must be made on only its signal. Such warning is not required when its warning is provided by the watchman gates, known as the function. Shoving cars are forward ended of the leading car or equipped with the brake valve or backup hose or air whistle handled by a crew member. Rule 103A: automatic crossing devices. When a movement has been delayed or stopped within 3,000 feet of a roadway or road crossing equipped with an automatic crossing warning device, the crossing must not be equipped in either forward or reverse movement unless the crossing warning device has been operated for 20 seconds to provide warning, and if not known that such device has been operating for 20 seconds, a crew member must be rounding at the crossing to warn traffic until the crossing is occupied. The crew members must be observed. All automatic crossing warning devices reporting any that are not working properly to the train dispatcher and proper authority by the first available means of communication, giving warning to other movements unless other means of warning traffic has been made. 103B: projecting adjacent track. When a train or cutouts of part of a clear road crossing not protected by a watchman is standing near such a crossing, cross members must be positioned to warn the traffic against the trains or engines approaching an adjacent track or practical. Rule 103: clearing and crossing a circuit. Cars or engines must be left clear of a road crossing and crossing signal circuits, and when they are avoided, cars or the engine must not be left standing near more than 250 feet of the road crossing. Rule 103: actuating signals. Unnecessary automatic crossing signals must not be actuated unnecessary upon each permitting equipment must permit each Rule 103D: actuating signals unnecessary. Automatic crossing signals must not be actuated unnecessarily by open switch or permitting equipment to stand controlling circuit. When this cannot be avoided, the signals equipped with a manual operating crew member must manually operate the signal by the movement of the track. A crew member must restore signals automatic operation before crossing occupied train engineing before leaving the crossing. Rule 103: handling an engine ahead of the engine. Except for the switching movements other necessary, cars must not be shoved. When shoving cars, or movement must be made to restricted speeds unless movement is controlled by brake valves leading car. When controlled by the train, movement has been authorized in one direction. When it is controlled, the train movement has been authorized in that direction. The movement may be made not exceeding 40 miles per hour. Rule 103F: blocking public crossing. A public crossing must not be blocked no longer than 15 minutes when it is not avoided. Rule 103G: when switch safety and efficiency personnel performing switching must be efficiently in manner in which they avoid personally injuring the contents of the cars, equipment, structures, or other property. 103H: understanding between the crews switching. When engines may be working at both ends of the track, there must be an understanding movements that are being made avoiding injury and damage. 103I: precautions coupling and moving. Before coupling and moving cars to the engine, it must be known that it is properly secured and can be coupled and move safely. Couplings must be made at speed no more than 4 miles per hour. Slack must be stretched to be sure of all couplings are made. 103J: shoving and fouling. When a car, engine, or shoved in condition requires a crew member must be positioned in the clearly seen on the leading car in advance of movement to provide protection. The car must not be shoved to foul leads adjacent tracks until it is safe to do so. Unless protection is provided, car or engines must not be left standing, and when in the foul equipment on adjacent track or cause of injury, personnel riding on the side of the car of injury. Our engine. 103K: testing hand brakes. Personnel must be not operated the type of brakes that are used and necessary to control prevent movement of the car to the hand brakes. Test must be performed to ensure the hand brakes are operative before they are or use 103L. Securing cars and engines. The air brake must not be dependent upon the hold of the train to the engine of the cars is placed when left unattended. When the engine of the cars are left standing, and enough hand brakes must be applied to prevent the movement of the air brakes to release, and the hand brakes are not equipped for the wheels must be blocked before engine and detached, and the train are cut off. The cars left standing on the grade. Slack must be bouched, and enough hold hand brakes must be set to descend to the end of the train to be secured to detach the portion. When the engine is recoupled to the train of the cars, the handle brakes must not be released until the air brakes system is fully recharged. When the cars are moved and the track and other cars are left standing, enough hand brakes must be applied to prevent remaining cars from moving. 103M. Kicking and dropping. Kicking and dropping cars will be permitted only when such movements can be made without dangers to personnel, equipment, or contents of the cars. Before dropping, car crew members involved must have an understanding of the movement of this to be made. The track must be sufficiently clear. Switches and the hand brakes must be in working order. The engines must run in a straight track when practicable. Cars must not be dropped over the switches or dual control switches. 103N. Hazardous material and high value loads. Cars containing hazardous material is designated in instruction. Hazardous materials in cars when designated as a high valve load must not be cut off while no motion. Struck by any car moving under the momentum or coupled with any more force than necessary to couple. 103O. Cars may be loaded and unloaded. Before coupling and moving to the cars of the tracks where couples are being loaded, unloaded, platforms, borders, tanker car couplings, connections, conveyors, loading and unloading, spouts, similar appliances, connection vehicles, obstruction must be removed, clear, and plug type of swinging doors in the cars must be closed. Person on the about of the most vacant cars of the switch exercise care for the avoid the damage to the loading partial loaded cars. In cars known as the improper, unevenly loaded, and extent of their danger to load, shifting, and failing of the cars, derailing, overturning, they must be handled in loading and unloading. Employees must be pretty cautious to prevent loading from becoming unevenly distributed to the extent of the danger of the car, overturning, derailing any car that has been placed or loaded on unloading, which has been released from the movement and may return to the original location otherwise directed. Rule 103.4. Rule 103P. 103P. I repeat, Rule 103P. Switching passengers in occupied cars. Before switching passengers equipped to occupied outfits must be coupled. Braking system charged. Automatic braking valve must be used in switching. When the coupling is made, the couplers must be fully compressed, switch stretched to no knuckles are locked, and making an airstream in electrical connections. Utmost caution must be used to avoid rough handling. Passenger cars or similar equipped to occupied outfit cars must not be cut out of the motion. No car moving around the momentum should be allowed to strike them. When sign of reading occupied outfit cars is attached to the switch to the cars, it must be not coupled or not moved until the occupants have been notified of the permission given by the foreman of his representative. Rules 103. Addition switching precautions. The following equipment must not be not unnecessarily switched with nor couplings or manner may cause equipment or load. Passenger or of outfit cars, intermodular TOFC cars, cabooses most level loaded, or cabooses multi-level loaded, cars containing livestock and obtaining top load shifting. Rule 103. Movement through the gates of the doorway. Before engines or cars move through the gates of the doorway, similar openings they must be stopping gates. Doorways opening must completely open. Secure the engines, cars, and pass them through the most enough overhead side clearance of the allowed passage. Rule 103. Necessary brakes are charged. The cars must not be handled without air brake systems charges unless they can be handled and stopped and required in distance and necessary sufficient numbers of cars must be air hose coupled brake system charged to permit the controlling of the movement. Rule 103T. Movement in the spur of track. Movement in the spur of track must be controlled by the prevent damage to the end of the spur, the shoving of the cars of the spur track into the spur track, movement of the stop 150 feet at the end of the spur through the movement of the proceeding of the crew member, whether can be done or safely, or movement must be made only on his signal. Rule 104, hand operating switches. When spring and dual control switches operated on hand, they are considered a hand operated switches. The rules governing a hand operated switches apply to them, except for the cars must be not dropped over them. Rule 104, position of switches. The handing of the switches derails responsibility. Position switches derail beginning use. When practicable, crew members' engine ensures the switches derails near the engines are properly lined. Personnel handling switches derails ensure that they are properly lined and routed to be used. The points must be points T properly indicating the target or lamp. If so, it is required to correspond to the position of the switch at the operating level is equipped for the latch. Personnel must not be step on the latch to release it. Must not step on the latch to release the operating lever, except for throwing the switch except for when throwing the switch. After locking a switch or derail, the lock would may be tested to know it's secured. Rule 104B, the main track switches. Normal position of main track switches. The main track movement, it must be left lined, locked in position, exception in which they may be left in open in our CTC territory and hold the track ever in limits Z intended by the crew member in which the switch tender. During the switch operation, when it is positively known as no other train and the engine will not pass over the switch, for any other train or engine will be attended for the member of the crew. Z is when the ABS is in the meeting in the passing point of the training operation without a caboose may leave the siding switching line locking siding train using main track must stop and the crew member must align the lock switching and non-personnel. One track switches and equipped and targeted will be shown red and lined in other normal positions. Rule 104, crossing over switches and siding. Normal position switch when connecting any track except for main track and siding line and locked and secured movement of the siding. The normal position crossover switches is lined over the crossover movement. The most lined in the normal position except for when changed immediately to the movement through them. Rule 104D to the approaching movements. Other tracks must not be fouled nor switched or operated at conflicting movement in the closing of approaching switches, except for spring switches. Trains must not follow a main track signal track, pass beyond the installation joints, clearance points until switches connected with the movement of the properly aligned crossover switches must be not unlocked, not be unlocked or aligned or crossover movement when there is another movement approaching and the passing over either switch. Rules 104, equipped with locks and hooks. When not in use, switches equipped with locks must be locked, with switches equipped with hooks and latches must be hooked and latched. For a movement in either direction over switch, such switches must be latched and secured, placing a hook and hasp for the train movement in the facing point direction. And switches equipped for the locking point must be in switch passing defective and must be replaced, and the cannot switch in the most spiked report in one of the either train dispatchers when the yard master supervises and charges. Rule 104F, clearing and main training. A train engine leaving a main track must be cleared of the main track before stopping the main train man attending to the switches. The switch must be restored in normal position and the train is entirely clear of the main track. 104G, restoring the normal position. The personnel alighting the movement of the equipment and is in order to restore the main track switching to the normal position when the practicable get off on the opposite side of the equipment of the switch stand. Rule 104H, the lining of the main track switch. After lining a main track switch of the train entering and leaving of the train main track, the person attending to the switch must go to the opposite side of the main track. Practical must not return to the switch until the movement has been completed, and then when it is not practical to the opposite end, the main track personnel will stand for 20 feet of the switch stand. Rule 104, clear the main track. Except for when switching the movement, the train engine is approaching the passing of the main track. Personnel must be 20 feet from any of the main track. When the train engine is sliding on the track or to be asked by the person who attends the switch path must be 150 feet over the switch and is used to accept the train and clearly approaching. Outside block system limits the inspector of the train most closely approaching the crew member when will and inspect the point switch of the expected train will be passed and determined switches that are aligned in the route and to be used and switch pointed properly if the switch is left is secured. Rule 104, switches run through. Switches other than other spring switches, variable switches must not be run through. If a rigged switch is run through, it is unsafe, must not be protected. The switch must be spiked unless a trackman other than competent employee takes charges at once, and if an engine car partially runs through such a switch, the entire movement must be continued. Reverse movement must not be made over the damaged switch until it has been spiked or repaired. Rule 104: Scale track switches. Scale track switches must be lined and dead rails when provided in rules when scales are not in use. Rule 104.11. Rule 104L. Rule 104L: derails. Personnel in a train engine that service must know the location of all fixed rails and controlled movements must not be made over the derailing position except for when placed in a non-derailing position to permit the movements must be derailing position within or without cars of the track. They equip the locked and must be locked. Rule 104M: the M spring switches. The spring switches are identified by letters S and double S. Special target signs, lights, facing points, movements, or spring switches that are protected with signals, indicators where indicated. The governor movement over the spring switch displays stop, or proceed indication. The indicator displays stop, or displays stop and inspect switch indication, and when it is stop. And when the switch is not protected, the single indicator of the train engine must be facing the movement stop. And the crew member must test the switch unless the switch has been lined and the diverging routing of the crew advisory train of the order and the track bulletin spring switch has been spiked. The test must be lining switches over the backhand of the examining switch of the point and to see that they fit properly. 1. Trailing through the stopping. A train of the engine trailing through the stopping of the spring switches and the must be controlled switch must be lined and handed before the making of the reverse movement of the taking slack. 2. Stopped and signal. When a train engine is stopped and a signal governing trailing movement through a spring switch or non-conflicting movement is evident, the switch must be operated by hand for the route not to be used unless the signal can be cleared on operating key release. If the switch equipped with a facing point is operated by hand, it is not to be lifted, lined, or locked in normal position until after the movement after the movement has been completed. If the switch is not equipped within the facing point of the lock, it may not be lined and locked in normal position after the leading wheels have been passed at the following point to the location of the spring switch is equipped for the facing point, locking the designation of the timetable or general order. 3. The original position of the practical trainman should make sure the spring switches have been returned to the original position after being trailed through. 4. Snow and ice storms. During snow and ice storms, other conditions prevent a spring switch from functioning properly. Training movement must not be made through spring switch until it has been lined by hand by movement. 5. Trailing movement face point lock. When a trailing movement has not to be made by a spring switch equipped with a face point lock, when initial movement of the swing switch is not actuated by the engine at a switch point, it must be lined to the hand, but the movement must be not returned to the normal position until the movement has been completed. Spiking spring switch. If it is necessary to spike a spring switch, it must be protected. Rule 104: Damaged defective switches. If a switch is defective, a report must be made to the train dispatcher and the yard master or the supervisor. The switch may be spiked unless the trackman takes charge at once. If not, it cannot be made in safe protection. It must be provided. Rule 104: use of sand. Manual sanding should be used in over movable interlocking retardant spray switches. Variable switches or proper power operated switches practicable to avoid it. Rule 104P: protection of a bow track. Before a train in the yard, crew member couples their air hoses, adjusts its coupling, performs maintenance on a bolt tracking during the humping operations. The protection against the cars are released from the hump into the track must be provided as follows. An individual must notify the personnel controlling the switch which provided access to the hump to the track in which such work is performed. Upon such notification, or remotely controlled switch must be lined against the movement, and affected bolt track personnel must ensure the locking and blocking device reminder is applied to control from the switch. The personnel must not be notified and required protection provided that such protection shall be maintained until advised that the work is completed and the protection is no longer required. Rule 105: more than other than the main track, except on the track where the block system is in effect, the train engines using the other main track must be prepared to stop within one half of the range of the vision short of the train engine railroad car stop signals, derail, switch not on proligned. Rule 105. Sidings are assigned directions. Sidings or assigned directions must not be used in reverse direction unless otherwise train dispatcher in an emergency under flag protection. 105. Clearing the siding practicable. Train entering the siding must not stop in the entire train in the clear. 105. C's cars left on the siding. Cars must not be left in sidings unless unauthorized by the train dispatcher, except for the emergency. In case of the train dispatchers, must be properly notified. Rule 106: responsible of train man, engineer, and engine man. The conductor and the engineer are responsible for the safety protection of their train. Observance of the rules under conditions not provided by the rules. They must take the precaution of the protection. 1. General direction of the government of the train is vested in the conductor. The train is combined in the more than one conductor. The conductor with more seniority will be charged of all persons working on the train must obey the instruction. Personnel will not comply the instruction in the imperil safety of the train involve the violation of the rules should they doubt the authority of the proceeding. The safety conductor must consult with the engineer equally responsible for the safety properly handling the train. Conductors engineers must know their subordinate familiar with their duties. Know that the accepted and experienced knowledge of the rules instruct them when necessary the proper safe performance of the work. When the conductor is not present, the trainman must promptly obey the instructions of the engineer relating to the rules, safety, and protection of the train. Other crew members are carefully reading the train orders, track warrants, and track bulletins. Must keep in mind that assistance in their observance there must be immediately call the attention to the conductor engineer and if to apparent failure to observe the requirements of the clear main track or to comply with the rules of instruction. The safety train's observance of the rules involved and the other crew members responsible extend to their ability to prevent accidents, violation of the rules. When the conductor and the engineer fails to action to take to stop an emergency requires the crew members to make immediate action to stop the train. 5. The conductor must advise the engineer dispatcher any restriction placed on the equipment being handled. Rule 106: maximum seats, maximum speed. Conductors and engineers responsible for ensuring maximum authorized speed for operation or their train or the engine. Such speed must be exceeded. The passenger speed is applicable only to the train consisting entirely of passenger equipment. When possible to do, the personnel must promptly advise the train to dispatch of any known condition which delay to prevent training of making usual speed. 107: receiving discharge passenger. When the passenger is receiving discharging traffic, train engine must not pass the station performs a late unless a safeguard is provided. 108: safe course. In case of a doubt, and certainly the safe course must be taken. 101, 109: inspection passing the train. Personnel must be inspecting passing trains in dangerous conditions. If in dangerous conditions are detected, such overheated journals, brakes, sticking, wheel sliding, dragging equipment, ensuring insecure lading, and they must be given a stop signal to crew members on passing train. In addition, advise the condition of any other available means. When practicable, the train dispatcher must be notified on once in train does not stop. If no defect is detected, they will give a proceeding signal. And the practical crew member on the engine must provide to the crew to the rear of the train and the radio. The train is inspected. The personnel other than the train warning detector. The crew members must be lookout of the trackside warning detector signals of the four-person inspecting the train. If the stop is received for the trackside warning detector activated on the attention of called to the dangerous conditions, the train must be stopped and immediately the inspector determined that it is safe for the movement for proceeding. When the train stops, it must not be passed another train or trainman on the head of the end of the fireman. If available, must inspect the passing from the ground. If so, the crew member must cross the track, inspect the side of opposite train. Rule 109: train inspection. The crew members must make walking and rolling inspections when practicable. The train stops en route. Walking inspection train must be made at the time will permit. The crew members must frequently inspect the train while moving and watching the signals indicating the track and the train, especially on the curves approaching the switches, inspecting the standings, moving the train. Crew members must observe the track, closing the overheated journals, striking brakes, sliding wheels, improperly positioned wheels on rail, dragging equipment, insecure lading a single and smoke and fire or other dangerous conditions and defects, discovery of the train and moving it most was promptly and effective founding the corrected if possible when necessary to set out the defective car. No attempt will be made to move the car out to the set out of the point until making certain that it is safe to do so. When the car is set out to do the hot box, all fires must be completely extinguished. A black slid The box lid closed is the precaution taken to prevent the further ignition when the cars are set out due to defects. The cars are then lighting of the most clear of their tracks. Rule 109B, the inspection of other movements and the requirement of the inspection of trains in Rule 109 and 109A will apply to other movements except when switching. 109C, trackside detector. Trackside warning detector does not relieve personnel from making inspections required rules. When a wide load detector actuated at a point whether the adjacent track may be obstructed, the crew must provide protection and prescribed in Rule 102. The 101 Rule 151 movement at the double track. On the double track, train must keep to the right unless otherwise instructed. 152 the movement against the current of the traffic. Movement against the current of the traffic must be authorized as train order track warrant, except for provided by Rule 93 and 94. Trains and engines moving against the current of the traffic prepared to stop approaching interlocking facing point spring switches unless track is clearly switches properly lined signal indicated, and they will not apply to the spring switches outside interlocking switches. And the crew will advise the train dispatcher the switch has been spiked in normal position. Rule 153 multiple main tracks. The multiple main tracks are in service. Each main track will designate the name and the number. When necessary, use of the train will indicate the timetable. Chapter 3, Train Orders.